The dust was a living thing. It coated Elia's tongue, settled in the creases of his sun-weathered face, and danced in the shimmering heat rising from the main street of Redemption, a town whose name had long ago become a bitter joke. He stood on the splintered planks of the train station platform, his shadow a short, stark stain on the wood. The sun was a merciless hammer in a bleached white sky, beating down on the cracked earth of his ranch, on the skeletal remains of his cattle, and now on him. Loneliness was a deeper drought than the one that had stolen his livelihood. It had hollowed him out over the past 3 years, leaving a silence in his small cabin that was louder than any storm. It was that silence that had driven him to do it, to answer an advertisement in an old newspaper from the East, a matrimonial agency promising respectable, hardworking women for lonely men building a life in the West. He'd sent a letter, a photograph of himself from 10 years ago when hope still lived in his eyes, and nearly all the money he had left. It felt like a fool's bargain, a desperate purchase for a person. He pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket. The handwriting was neat, delicate. Her name was Clara. She wrote of being an orphan, of hard times, and a desire for a new beginning. Her words were simple, proper, and held a whisper of hope that he himself had long since lost. The agency had assured him she was healthy and strong, ready for the rigors of ranch life. Elias wasn't looking for a field hand. He was looking for a presence, a voice to fill the suffocating quiet, a hand to hold when the coyotes howled at a moon that seemed to mock his solitude. The distant whistle of the train was a mournful cry that sliced through the afternoon's oppressive stillness. Elias straightened his back, his worn leather boots scuffing the platform. A few other people milled about, a family waiting for relatives, a merchant checking his pocket watch. None paid him any mind. He was just another broken rancher, a common sight in these parched lands. The great black engine hissed into the station, steam and smoke momentarily obscuring the view. When it cleared, a handful of passengers disembarked. Elias scanned their faces, his heart a clumsy drum against his ribs. He looked for the woman from the agency's description, fair-haired, of sturdy build, and a pleasant disposition. And then he saw her. She was the last one off, hesitating on the final step as if unsure the ground would hold her. She was fair-haired, yes, but the rest of the description was a cruel lie. The woman clutching a small, battered suitcase was anything but sturdy. She was a ghost, a wisp of a thing swallowed by a threadbare dress that hung from her sharp shoulders. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes wide and haunted, darting around as if expecting a blow. She looked less like a prospective bride and more like a refugee fleeing a war. His first thought was not of disappointment, but a sharp, unexpected pang of something else, pity and shame. He had paid for this. His money, his loneliness, had summoned this terrified, starving girl across a continent to a land of dust and decay. The agency had taken his money and her hope and swindled them both. He watched as she flinched when the station master called out, his voice booming. She hugged her small suitcase to her chest like a shield. She looked lost, utterly and terrifyingly alone. The idea of presenting himself as her intended husband felt monstrous. The agreement, the contract, the entire premise of their arrangement evaporated in the brutal heat. Taking a slow breath, Elias walked toward her. He kept his hands visible, his movements deliberate, the way one approaches a spooked foal. She saw him coming and her frame tensed, her knuckles white where she gripped the handle of her bag. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough from disuse. It came out like a growl, and he saw her shrink back. He softened it, trying again. "You're Clara?" She gave a tiny, jerky nod, her gaze fixed on the dusty tips of his boots. She couldn't have been more than 20. He didn't know what to say. The words he'd rehearsed, about his ranch, their future, the life they could build, all felt like ash in his mouth. They were built on a foundation of lies, so he chose the only truth that mattered in that moment. "You look tired," he said, his voice still gravelly but gentler. "And hungry. My wagon's over here. Let me get you out of this sun. There's a hot meal and a clean bed waiting for you. No questions asked." He reached for her bag, not to take it, but with an open palm, an offer. Her frightened eyes flickered up to his for the first time. They were the color of a stormy sky, and in their depths, he saw a mirror of his own desperation. After a long moment of hesitation that stretched into an eternity, she let him take the small, surprisingly light suitcase. He said nothing more, simply turned and walked toward the dilapidated buckboard wagon, trusting she would follow. The silent space he left behind him was a question, and her quiet footsteps in the dust were the beginning of an answer. The ride to the ranch was a journey through a world bleached of color and life. The wagon wheels groaned, kicking up clouds of fine, pale dust that coated everything in a layer of grit. Clara sat rigid on the wooden bench, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white stones. She stared out at the landscape, a panorama of desolation that seemed to stretch into eternity. The sun, a merciless white orb in a washed-out sky, beat down on cracked earth webbed with the ghosts of long-dead streams. Brittle, skeletal shrubs clung to the ground, their branches reaching like the hands of the buried. To Clara, who had fled the suffocating confines of a city slum, this oppressive emptiness was a different kind of prison, one with no visible walls but just as inescapable. Her fear was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. Every jolt of the wagon, every creak of the leather harnesses, sent a tremor through her. She risked a sideways glance at the man beside her. Elias. He hadn't spoken a word since they'd left the skeletal remains of the town. He just held the reins, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his jaw set in a grim line. His silence was a canvas onto which she painted her worst fears. What kind of man lived out here, alone in this godforsaken wasteland? The agency had promised a prosperous rancher. This man, with his worn clothes and the deep lines of worry etched around his eyes, was not prosperous. The land itself screamed of failure. Was he a monster? A madman who had lured her to a place where no one would ever hear her scream? Yet, he hadn't touched her. He hadn't even looked at her with the leering hunger she had come to expect from men. He had offered her food. He had carried her bag. These small kindnesses were so alien to her experience that they were, in themselves, suspicious. The ranch, when they finally arrived, was a surprise. It was as battered by the drought as the surrounding land, the barn leaning slightly as if tired of standing, the fences looking brittle. But the small cabin in the center of it all was tidy. A porch, swept clean of dust, ran along the front. The windows were grime-free, and a few hardy, sun-scorched pots near the door held the withered remains of what must have once been flowers. It spoke of care. It spoke of a stubborn refusal to surrender completely to the decay. Elias pulled the wagon to a halt and looped the reins around the brake handle. For a moment, he just sat there, the silence stretching. "Well," he said, his voice raspy from disuse, "this is it." He gestured vaguely at the cabin. "It's not much, but it's clean." He climbed down, his movements stiff, and came around to her side. He didn't offer a hand, but simply stood back, giving her space. Clara hesitated, her muscles frozen, before swinging her thin legs over the side and sliding to the ground. She felt unsteady, the earth seeming to sway beneath her feet. Elias picked up her tattered bag and led the way to the porch. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, holding it for her. Taking a deep breath that filled her lungs with the scent of hot dust and dry wood, she followed him. The interior was a single room, but it was larger than she'd expected and meticulously organized. A sturdy bed with a patchwork quilt was in one corner. A simple wooden table and 2 chairs sat in the center. Along one wall was a cast-iron stove and shelves holding a modest collection of tins and crockery. Everything was scrubbed clean, from the wooden floorboards to the soot-stained stovepipe. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of wood smoke and coffee. It was the smell of a home. You can sit," Elias said, gesturing toward the table. He set her bag down gently by the door. "I expect you're hungry." He didn't wait for an answer. He moved to the stove with an economy of motion that spoke of long habit. He stoked the embers, added a few small pieces of wood, and soon a comforting warmth began to push back against the room's chill. Clara watched him, her fear warring with a desperate, gnawing hunger. He worked methodically, slicing thick pieces of salt pork from a slab and laying them in a heavy skillet. The sizzle and pop as they hit the hot iron was the loudest sound she had heard in hours, and the smell that filled the small cabin was dizzying. He brewed coffee, the rich aroma a balm to her frayed nerves, and opened a can of beans, warming them in a small pot. He set a plate before her. On it were 3 crispy strips of salt pork, a steaming pile of beans, and a thick slice of bread. It was the most food she had seen in one place in months. Her eyes filled with tears, blurring the sight of the meal. She stared at it, her hands trembling in her lap, not daring to reach for it. Was it a test? Would it be snatched away? Elias sat opposite her, his own plate untouched. He looked at her, his gaze direct but not unkind. "Go on," he said softly. "It's for you. Eat." That was all it took. The dam of her restraint broke. She snatched the bread and devoured it in 3 bites, barely tasting it. Then she picked up the fork and shoveled the beans and pork into her mouth, the hot, salty, savory flavors exploding on her tongue. She ate with a desperate, animalistic haste, shame and hunger churning within her. She didn't stop until the plate was clean, wiped bare with the last crust of bread. Only then did she look up, breathing heavily, her face flushed with shame at her own ravenous display. Elias hadn't moved. He was just watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. It wasn't disgust. It was something closer to sorrow. He pushed his own plate toward her. I'm not that hungry," he lied. This time, she ate slowly. The fierce edge of her hunger had been blunted, and now she could taste the food, feel its warmth spreading through her. When she was finished, she set the fork down and folded her hands on the table, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The payment. The demand. Elias finally picked up his coffee cup and took a long swallow. He stared into the dark liquid as if the words he needed were floating there. "The man who runs the agency, he's a liar," Elias began, his voice low and steady. "He promises things. A sturdy, healthy woman for a prosperous rancher. I suppose we were both sold a bill of goods." He finally met her eyes, and she saw the deep shame in them. "This ranch, it's failing, Miss Clara. The drought has been going on for 3 years. The creek's gone, the cattle are mostly sold or dead, and I'm deep in debt to the bank. There's no prosperity here." He let that hang in the air, the brutal honesty of it more shocking than any threat. "I sent for a bride because the loneliness, it gets to be too much. A man can stand against a lot of things, but silence is a heavy weight. I thought a wife would make it bearable. That wasn't fair of me, to bring someone into this mess." He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the dying land. "When I saw you at that station, looking so scared, I knew I couldn't hold you to any arrangement. It would be a sin." He turned back to face her. "So here is the truth of it. You are free. There is no bargain. You can stay here in this cabin. You can eat my food and rest until you have your strength back. When you're ready, I'll give you what money I have left and I will take you to the next town, put you on a train, and you can go wherever you please. No one will ever have to know you were here. No questions asked. No payment expected." He paused, and his next words were quieter, laced with a vulnerability that startled her. "Or you can stay, not as a bride I bought, not as a cook or a housekeeper, but as a partner, to see if we can make a life out of what's left here, to fight this land together. It's a poor offer. I'm offering you half of nothing, but I won't be alone, and neither will you." He looked down at his calloused hands. "The choice is yours, truly, and I will honor whatever you decide." Clara stared at him, her mind reeling. She thought of the life she'd fled, the filth, the hunger, the constant, creeping fear of men who saw her as a thing to be used and discarded. She thought of the terrifying emptiness of the world outside this cabin. He was right. He was offering her half of nothing. But that nothing came with a clean bed, a full stomach, and the quiet dignity of a choice. It was more than anyone had ever offered her before. Her past was a certainty of misery. Her future, if she left, was a terrifying unknown. This place, this quiet, somber man, this was an unknown too, but it was the first one that didn't feel like a threat. Her throat was tight, her voice a reedy whisper she barely recognized. She looked from his earnest, tired face to the clean plate in front of her, the first plate she had cleaned in years without fear. "I'll stay," she said. The word hung in the air, small but solid. A look of profound relief washed over Elia's face, softening the harsh lines of worry. He didn't smile, but his eyes did. He simply nodded, accepting her decision with the same quiet gravity with which he had offered it. "All right, Clara," he said, and it was the first time her name sounded like it belonged to her. All right. 6 months later, the rain came. It wasn't a deluge, not the drought-breaking miracle they had prayed for, but a soft, steady drizzle that lasted for 2 days. It was enough. It settled the dust, darkened the cracked earth, and filled the air with the rich, clean scent of wet soil. Clara stood on the porch, her hand resting on the railing Elia's had repaired a month prior. She had filled out, the hollows in her cheeks were gone, replaced by the healthy glow of regular meals and peaceful sleep. Her hair, once dull and thin, shone in the gray light. She was still slender, but no longer fragile. Resilience had taken root in her. Their life was one of hard work and small victories. They had cleared a plot of land near the well, the one source of water that had never run dry, and planted a vegetable garden. Clara, who had never touched soil in her life, discovered a fierce joy in coaxing green shoots from the stubborn ground. Elias had taught her how to mend fences, how to read the clouds, how to live with the land instead of just on it. He spoke more now, sharing stories of his childhood on this very ranch, of the way things used to be before the rains stopped. And she, in turn, began to share pieces of her own past, the shadows losing their power in the telling. Their partnership was a quiet, growing thing. It was in the shared meals, now filled with easy conversation. It was in the way he'd bring her a cup of coffee as she weeded the garden, or the way she'd have a hot meal waiting when he came in from a long day of repairs. There was a night a month ago when a coyote had been howling near the cabin. She had woken with a start, her heart pounding with an old, familiar fear. Elias, sensing her terror from his cot across the room, had simply said, "It's all right, Clara. I'm here. You're safe." And she had believed him. He came to stand beside her on the porch now, holding 2 steaming mugs. He handed one to her, their fingers brushing. It was a simple touch, but it sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Smell that?" he asked, his voice low. He breathed in deeply. "That's the smell of hope." She looked out at their world. It was still a harsh landscape, but it was no longer desolate to her. She saw the sturdy fence line, the dark, damp patch of the garden, the barn that now stood straight and true. She saw their work. She saw their life. "The agency said you were a prosperous rancher," she teased gently, her first attempt at such a joke. Elias looked at her, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face, a sight that was still rare enough to feel like a gift. He looked from her face to the thirsty land drinking in the rain, then back to her. "Well," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "I am now."